know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
All right, good evening. Welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin, Matt Moniz, science advisor. Sorry. I was so excited to come on the air. I totally screwed up the intro. Let's start over. Welcome to Spooky South Coast.
Because of the beards.
Tim
Way too
Weisberg
many
here,
beards in here.
along with the silent assassin, Matt Costa, science advisor, Matt Moniz, and an alien life form that has taken over his face. The symbiotic hairy creature that he's tentatively calling Beard until it receives further classification. I know you sent samples to David Jacobs, right?
Yes.
And is there any truth to the rumor that Tom Biscardi glued that to your face?
I can neither confirm or deny that.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. And now Matt Costa thinks he's going to start growing a beard. Matt, I know you can't. Nobody can see you on Spooky TV, but if you get a chance, make sure you pop in front of the camera so that they can see this. It's pretty
rugged.
It's pretty amazing because you didn't look like that yesterday when you said you were going to start growing a beard. Should I get involved in this? I've already kind of got the goatee going. It's not really more bushier than your goatee. Actually, I'm married, so there's no way I could get away with participating in this contest. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about... Normally, we talk about the paranormal here on Spooky South Coast. Tonight, we're going to talk about a little bit of hidden history that you might not be familiar with, not only for the locals here in the South Coast and Cape Cod area, but also to our national and international listeners as well. We always hear back from people when we do shows about local history. It seems to be something that's extremely popular, and I wonder if it's because of our area being so unique and having such a rich history, or if it's because maybe if you listen to a lot of paranormal talk shows, it's stories that you don't get to hear from other parts of the country. So whatever it is that you like about the local stories, we love bringing it to you. We love educating you about things that we know about, and we really love learning about things that we don't know anything about. And that's kind of the case with both things that we'll be discussing tonight. I was unfamiliar with the whole story of what we'll discuss in the first hour, Bellamy's Bride, The Search for Maria Hallett of Cape Cod by Kathleen Brunelle. She's going to be joining us to talk with us about who Maria Hallett was, who people said she was, and all about her love affair with the pirate Black Bellamy. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how it relates to some of the paranormal tales of Cape Cod that you may have heard. And then coming up in the second hour, we're going to talk about 4 brave freed slaves who defended this country, defended this colony in the Revolutionary War, and were given some land by the town of Plymouth for their efforts, and the efforts that modern day people are making to build a museum on that site. So we're going to be joined by a representative from the Parting Ways Project a little bit later on, Wayne Ibn Musa Barboza. And you might have seen the story in last week's Standard Times by Jack Spillane about Parting Ways. So we're going to talk about all that and more. So I'm just happy that we can bring this history out there. Guys, I know that you love to learn about this stuff as much as I do.
Of course.
Matt Moniz, who had last week off, he was out partying. But one of the things that we talked about last week is, we talked about Spiricom.
Yep.
And we talked about some of the claims against it, we'll say. And it seems like, a lot of the times when we're dealing with history, people tend to want to shoot it down just as much as they want to prop it up in the years ensuing. And that's a great example of something that at the time was something that a lot of people talked about and believed in and was really excited about. Now, looking back at it, 30 years later, they're kind of poo-pooing it. And that's kind of what ends up happening. Hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
And I know that if you listen back to last week's show, you can find out more about the new Spiricom, which we'll be using at Dead of Winter, coming up at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast on February 26th. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the show. But just to let you know, before we get into tonight's discussion, there are only 4 tickets left. 4. And they're going fast. There's only 2 weeks left. You've got to definitely hop on board now. Go to ghostvillage.com/Lizzie, and that'll be your chance to get tickets. The number's up there for the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. They'll take care of you. There's no rooms left, but there are a few hotels. If you go to Priceline.com, you can find a few that are very reasonable. between the $55 and $85 price range. I recommend the Hampton Inn. If you can't stay at Lizzie Borden's, which is the ultimate place to stay at the Hampton Inn. So, all right, well, why don't we get into the first hour discussion with our guest, Kathleen Brunelle. She was born and raised on Cape Cod. She attended the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, where she earned bachelor's degrees in literature and writing and her master's degree in English. Her work has appeared in Cape Cod View, Art Times, Moxie, and The Shop. She currently teaches English at Old Rochester Regional High School in Mattapoisett, and she lives with her husband Robert, their son Balin, and their 2 golden retrievers. Probably not too far from our studios. Good evening, Kathleen. How are you tonight?
Great. How are you?
Oh, we are spooktacular, as we say here.
Good. Well, thank you for having me.
Well, we're very excited to talk with you about your book, Bellamy's Bride, The Search for Maria Hallett of Cape Cod. It's by the History Press.
Yep.
And you can go to KathleenBrunelle.com, which is linked up on SpookySouthcoast.com to pick up a copy. And it's also in all the local bookstores around here as well.
Yes, it is.
Now, it seems to me, when I'm reading the book, that this isn't something that you just came up with the idea for and decided to write a book. It seems like this is something you've been researching for a good number of years.
Yes, probably for about 10 years. I heard the story quite a while ago from my mother's friend, and she likes to tell me all sorts of paranormal stories and supernatural stories. So she fell in love with this story about Maria Hallett and Sam Bellamy, and she actually wanted me to write a book of fiction based on these characters. And I love history, and I love to research, and so I wanted to I wanted to look at the actual story because I thought that was a good story to tell. So.
Now, we've heard stories before. We've talked about them here on the show with guests like Derek Bartlett of the Cape and Islands Paranormal Research Society. We've talked about some of the ghost stories of Cape Cod, and one of the things that always comes up is the idea of these sea witches.
Yes.
And when I first saw the book Bellamy's Bride at the Sea Witch here in Fairhaven, I was intrigued by it because Marcia, the owner, recommended it so highly. And I didn't realize when I opened it up and started reading it that there is a witch connection. There's a paranormal connection. It seems like this story of Maria Hallett has a little bit of everything.
Yes, there's definitely a connection to the Sea Witch of Billingsgate. And actually, Maria Hallett seems to sort of morph into the Sea Witch of Billingsgate. The story of that Sea Witch and other Sea Witches were around for quite some time. And then slowly Maria seems to mix in with that story. And the Sea Witch of Billingsgate had red, flashy shoes and the same familiars as Maria had, and was known to dice with the devil in the belly of a whale. And lots of sailor stories of the time with the Sea Witch. And again, they keep mixing these stories with Maria Hallett. So she has become almost known now as the Sea Witch of Billingsgate. And most people believe when you speak of that Sea Witch that it's actually Maria Hallett.
But she didn't start with that Sea Witch reputation. Why don't you kind of fill everybody in on exactly how this story began between Maria Hallett and Bellamy?
Okay, Maria Hallett was probably, we believe, about 15 or 16 years old in the early 1700s, and she lived in Eastham on the Cape, as far as we know. And she probably spent a lot of time at a place called Great Tavern and on Great Island there. And she met up with Sam Bellamy, we assume. We know Sam Bellamy existed. He came from England, and he came over to stay with relatives on Cape Cod. He was a sailor, and he came to make his life out here, looking for an easy way out. He was looking for treasure. And she met him at some point, according to folklore. And when they met, it was, love at first sight. She was supposedly one of the most beautiful women in the village at the time, and her parents were farmers, well-to-do farmers. So she was, a prospective marriage for her. They were looking for a good connection for her, not really a poor sailor from England. And Bellamy was sort of rugged. And supposedly they met in an apple orchard, and love at first sight, and they spent the evening in the orchard. And in all the stories you get that it was the first night there. And some stories say that it was sort of a one-night thing and that he was leaving in the morning. He was heading down to the coast of Florida where some Spanish galleons sank off the coast of Florida after hurricane season as they were heading back with money to Spain. And so it was sort of a gold rush down there at the time, and Bellamy was one of the men heading down hoping to make some money for himself. And so some stories say that he left that, the next morning. And then other stories say that he was still on Cape for a few months before he left. And so, the story, whether or not he knew that Maria, because she was pregnant, so whether or not he knew that she was pregnant before he left, and that was maybe extra impetus for him to leave, or if he simply left and she found out that she was pregnant after he left. But she gave birth to a child within 9 months, a boy. Most of the legends say a boy, one says a girl. And the child died within a few days. Some say that very night. She was hiding the child and the pregnancy. And so when she gave birth to the child, she hid it in a barn, her uncle's barn, John Knowles. And the baby died supposedly by choking on a piece of straw while she was out, because she would go back and tend to it. The locals found she was sent to jail for the murder of the child and also for having a child out of wedlock. And then they go on from stories there with the East Ham jail of her dealings with the devil at the jail. So that starts all of the talk of her as a witch, because she escapes the jail 3 times, they say. And it was probably that she was very beautiful, and the jailer probably felt sympathy for her and probably let her go. She had probably already been whipped. There was a new whipping post installed for these very cases about a month prior to this case, and I have documentation of that. And so she heads out to the dunes, and there are these great, marvelous stories about the devil coming in with his gold-tipped cane and releasing the bars for her if she would sell her soul to him, and that none of this was her fault, and it was Bellamy's fault, and that she could seek revenge on Bellamy, and he would make sure that she had her revenge on the sailor, and that he would free her from the prison, and that's when she went to go make her home out on the dunes and live on her own, which added to the stories of her as a witch, because she was self-sufficient and she grew her own food, and she was a weaver as well, and supposedly people would only go to deal with her in the dead of night. They wouldn't be seen with her publicly.
Well, it seems like for something that happens so often in society now, the idea of these one-night stands and getting impregnated, and you work in high schools, what's it seems like, now it's commonplace, but back then, at least what I gathered from reading the book, is that it did happen, but there were very public consequences for it.
Yeah, it happened a lot. Actually, it happened far more than I realized. I was very surprised at the numbers. But girls had choices, at that time, and the choice was either to force the man to marry the girl, which they did. The girl would tell her parents, and the boy would be forced to marry her, or she could also marry another man. And if it was early enough in the pregnancy, then that man would just claim the girl, the child, as his. And, when I teach Canterbury Tales in the Middle Ages, that was a common practice. Any man would be willing to do so for, if he were paid enough. And so there were quite a few gentlemen willing to do that and marry these girls. But Maria was supposedly, according to all of these legends and stories, she was very obstinate, and she wanted Bellamy. That's who she wanted, and she was waiting for him, and that's what she was going to do, and gave birth to this child. So whether her parents knew of the pregnancy or not, again, depends on most of the stories. Most say that they did not know until after she gave birth to the child.
And what's interesting, just as she starts off as this pretty young maiden who develops the reputation of a witch, maybe not deservedly so, it seems like Bellamy is somebody who starts off with kind of good intentions, I guess you could say. I mean, the guy wanted to make some money, and he just becomes a pirate along the way.
Right, because many of the sailors down in the Caribbean at that time, they were all turning pirate. And so, and he felt, you know, he had a philosophy, and his philosophy was basically that he had every right to board ships and to take the booty from the ships, because he felt that the government was doing the exact same thing in England. And what gave the government the right to do that? He really developed sort of a democratic philosophy as a pirate. And look, I'm not an expert on the pirates, but I did do a lot of research, and looking into sort of the pirate code was very fascinating for me, very interesting, and the way that these men looked at their life on the sea, and they actually, they viewed themselves as free men. They were not subject to any government, and they took on slaves on the ships, Native Americans on the ships, and all of the men were free on the ships. So it was very interesting, and as a matter of fact, Bellamy took over 50 ships in the time that he was gone, and one of the reasons he rose to power was because his tutor, Hornigold, who also was a tutor for Blackbeard, he refused to attack British ships. And Bellamy did not have that problem. Bellamy didn't care. And so the men, they elected their leader, and they elected Bellamy, and they sent Hornigold packing. And they really, they voted, and the men collectively voted on everything right up to who would run the ship. And so that's how Bellamy took over. And when he found the Widow, which is the major ship in this love story, he chased that ship for 3 days, and they did have skirmishes there to get that ship, but there were only a few ships where he actually had to battle to get the ship. Usually they just put the pirate flag out, they went over, they boarded the ship, and they gave the captain one of their lesser ships in the flotilla and sent the captain on his way. And they gave the crew members the option to join or not. The only people they wouldn't give an option were as carpenters, if they needed carpenters, etc. Anyone they might need, they would sometimes force those people onto the ships. But other than that, they gave them the option.
I would think, too, that in that period of time, we talk a lot, especially in schools and history class, we talk a lot about the Revolutionary period.
Yep.
We talk a lot about the original founding of the colony, but it's those lost years in between, which is what we're talking about here in the 1715 era.
Yeah.
We're post King Philip's War, we're post Salem witch trials. We're at a time when our basic understanding is that the mounting tensions are against the English. Right. So maybe the pirate lifestyle would be very alluring for someone, almost like when a pirate boarded the ship, they'd say, "Yeah, I've been waiting for this." Yeah,
exactly. There was a boy. They just discovered a foot actually at the Widow, the bone, and in Robert Louis Stevenson's book, he actually alludes to this boy John King, and they say that his mother didn't want him to go, but when he was given the option to go into the pirate ship, he wanted to go. He was just a boy between 9 and 12 years old, and they actually, the shoe was still attached, and they have this at the Widow Museum in Provincetown. So fascinating, but yeah, surely an alluring life, an alluring option. And Bellamy didn't want to go home empty-handed, And if the stories were true that he wanted to marry Maria and he wanted to prove himself to her family, then he had to come home with some sort of money. And by the time he got down and was searching for the Spanish galleons, really the Spanish had recovered everything that they could from that wreck, and so there was nothing to be had. And so he did what everyone else was doing, and he went on the account, as they say. And he felt strongly about the fact that he had a right to do that, and that he was not subject to the British government.
Well, and that was the good thing about being on those ships, is as you mentioned in the book, it was pretty democratic. The captain was the boss, but other than that, things were done fairly equally. But with that being said, there was the chance that one pirate was going to screw over another pirate, maybe from another ship. And is that kind of what's believed? What ended up happening to Bellamy when the I'm sorry, how do you pronounce the name of the ship? The Widow.
The Widow.
Okay.
Yep.
When it ran aground, was that you mentioned different theories in the book of what actually happened, but what do you believe was the case of how that came to be?
Well, I think what happened was that Bellamy was not familiar with the Cape waters. And the Cape waters were very dangerous. There were no lighthouses at the time. and he happened to come back during the worst nor'easter to hit the Cape until that time. And so he didn't know what he had come into, and he flagged down a couple of different ships. The first ship was a Portuguese ship full of wine. And actually, one of the funniest things as I was researching is that his sailors, you know, he had his sailors board the ship. He had 7 sailors board that ship named the Marianne. And when they boarded the ship, they went looking for wine, and they couldn't get down into the barrels, so they went into the captain's private stock while the captain was standing on the Witta, very angry about all of that. And there was also another ship that he had flagged down, the Fisher, and basically asked them to bring him into port. He wanted to get into P-Town, is where he wanted to go, and because of the storm and because of the bars, the Witta was a very large ship, and it was his flagship. When he found the Witta, he knew that he would head home. This was a ship that was named after an African port. It was a slave ship. It was christened in England, and it was headed on its way back to England with all of the treasure, and he knew that that was the ship he would go home with, even though he'd captured, 50 prior to that. And so this was a big ship. He loaded it with cannons from his other ships in addition to the cannons that were already on it. So when the smaller ships ran aground in the storm, and they were supposed to hold the lantern to help Bellamy into port, there are stories that say, well, they didn't want to help him into port because they were afraid that he would raid Provincetown, and so they, led him onto the bars. The other ships were able to wait out the night, but when the Witta hit the ground, the ship literally broke. And when the ship broke, all of the cannons from the different decks came down onto pirates. I mean, there were over 100 pirates that washed up, but plenty of them who were literally pinned. The boy I was talking about before was one of those pirates, literally pinned under the weight of cannons and decks and everything else. And so I think that he got, everybody said, why is he going to the Cape? Nobody liked to head into port around the Cape at that time because of the storms that would come up. And he was, in fact, supposed to go to Maine and meet up with his quartermaster in Maine, and they would go there and clean the bottoms of the ships and, get everything together. But no, he wanted to go to the Cape, and everybody said, why did he want to go to the Cape? And, of course, the big part of the story is that he went for Maria, and he was going to get her and take her out of there. And so he decided to risk it. The weather had been good on the way up. It was April, and this storm came on suddenly. And I suspect that he had no idea. And by the time he was in it, it was already too late.
It turned out to be one of the, the storm of the century.
Right, absolutely. It was the worst to hit up until that point, and as a matter of fact, they say that there was actually, the Cape was actually split, and enough of a break for Cyprian Southhack, who was a map maker, sent in by the British Crown, because, of course, when they found out there was sunken treasure, they wanted it, they claimed it, and he was able to get a whaleboat through.
Wow.
And so, it was a devastating storm. And the people of the Cape were used to, shipwrecks. There's the old moon cussers. These were people who did the same type of thing I was talking about with the lanterns, and maybe because there were no lighthouses, they would put the lanterns out and force some of these ships to run aground, and so they could collect whatever was left. And by the time Cyprian Southhack came to the Cape looking for this treasure, the people of the Cape had already picked the Witta wreck clean, absolutely clean. And they said, "What shipwreck? There is no shipwreck. We don't know what you're talking about." And I found a great old advertisement at the Mass Archives, which was really cool, about how he said, that everybody who took treasure from that ship had to come at a certain time and meet him, and they had to give it back, and that it belonged to the Crown, and that as subjects they had to do so. And so there were some who brought pieces back, but they also they told him he was responsible for the bill of burying all the pirates. And he said, we shouldn't have buried them if you knew they were pirates. And they said, well, we did, and someone has to pay the bill, so you have to pay the bill. And it turned out to be just about the amount of money he had made from the people who brought money from the goods from the ship. And so he left with nothing but a cold and a hatred for Cape Codders. He was none too pleased. And supposedly his own ship was stopped by pirates on his way back to Boston, so I don't know how true that is, but he had nothing to give them. So.
Well, it seems like, though, as much as Bellamy became a feared pirate out in the open seas, it seemed like he had honorable intentions to come back and get Maria and to have that life that he hoped he could provide for her.
Yep.
You explore in the book the many different reasons as to why she might have ended up in the mythology that she did. Whether or not it was a matter of she lost her love, and or whether or not it was a matter of she felt burned by her love. Whatever it is, she definitely morphs into something different than who we meet early in the tale.
Absolutely, she transforms, and we're talking only a matter of years. In these legends, she goes from this beautiful, notably this beautiful woman who could have had anyone. They say down the long arm of the Cape, all over the Cape, known for her beauty, to literally to this hag of a woman who lived on her own, and they say, like you were saying, that perhaps she wanted revenge on Bellamy. Perhaps she felt that what happened to her was his fault, that he wasn't coming back for her, that he lied to her, that she wanted revenge on him, and that the wreck itself was her doing, her pact with the devil, that she did this for revenge. Some people say that she just longed for his return, that she loved him, that she was not angry with him. She knew he would come back for her, and that she would walk the dunes at night, and you would hear her cry in the wind, and it was the cry of her waiting for her love to come back. And if that were indeed true, the place at which she had her hut, which they call Goody's Hollow, and you can see on old maps, if you look at where the shipwreck occurred, she was literally feet from that wreck. And she would have seen it because she would have been walking these dunes at night. Now, whether she knew Bellamy to be on the ship or not, she would have been down there at that ship because she, like other people, would have gone when these ships wrecked to collect what she could. She was supposedly very good with herbs, and she may have, ministered to some of the sailors who washed up on shore. Perhaps, maybe she would have even seen Bellamy himself. He was never, they never, claimed to have seen his body on shore. So some people say that he survived, and perhaps he did, and, perhaps they went to P-Town together because a lot of the stories say that they would have been accepted there.
I think everybody's accepted in P-Town.
Yeah, 300 years ago as well. They'd have been accepted there. So the stories become very bizarre at this point because, is it that she hated him? And even in the stories where they say she hated him, they say at the last minute she regretted her decision and she wanted him, she didn't want him to die. So you have a couple of versions there. And then my favorite version would be, that she was waiting for him, and then when he comes, he dies, and how tragic for her that she would, after that period of waiting, that she would witness the shipwreck. And so, and then there are these great stories of years later of a man surfacing a couple years later in town, with money always in his pockets, with a scar on his forehead, who would say blasphemous things when you let him stay in your home at night when he was locked in his room, who they all said was a pirate, and many people thought they thought it to be Bellamy. And there's these great stories of how he visited Maria at her hut, and they're very confusing stories because the way in which Bellamy and Hallett speak to one another certainly does not indicate that they had any kind of love affair whatsoever. It indicates a pirate who's looking for his treasure that he buried and knew that Hallett had knowledge of it, and thinks that she's deceiving him and that she's hidden the treasure when she says she doesn't know where it is, or that there's not much left. And so then the stories end with him killing her for that reason, or her killing him, or her committing suicide. After he dies, there's stories of him just walking into the water and drowning, to go back where he should have died with his men. And so these stories all, start to come out depending upon the tales that you get. And there were a lot of tales in the 1930s. I'm not sure why, but in the 1930s there were a lot of different books out that really spoke to this legend with different sort of versions of it. And she, it's just bizarre that she morphs, and then she really mixes in with the Sea Witch of Billingsgate. And then they start saying that the cries that you hear at night are her cries as she finds Bellamy, on the beach. Or it's Bellamy and Maria finally walking together, the ghosts of the two of them walking together, and that you can hear her in the wind there. And whenever there were shipwrecks for 100 years after that, they were blamed on Goody Hallett. Always blamed on Goody Hallett, that she did it, that she was going to seek revenge on all sailors for what Bellamy did to her.
She became kind of like the Freddy Krueger of sailors,
Exactly.
Coming on to.
Yep.
Well, I was going to say, the book is called Bellamy's Bride, The Search for Maria Hallett of Cape Cod. The author is Kathleen Brunelle. You can get it locally and at KathleenBrunelle.com, Amazon.com, the History of Press's website. And, they've got great books, not just Ghosts of the South Coast. But they have so many great books where you get into the real history of some of these local stories, and they give authors a platform to tell these stories. I had always heard, when I hear about, ghost ships around Cape Cod,
yep.
I'd always heard more about, maybe later, the whaling ship era.
Yep.
You hear very few stories. It's either the very early colonial ships, or it's always the later ships. You don't hear enough about the pirate era and about those ships being seen out there. But they actually know that this ship did sail out there because it was found. The wreck was found, right?
Yes, the wreck was found, and many of the pieces finds are housed in the museum on Macmillan Wharf in P-Town. And Barry Clifford, Cape Codder, he went out and he found it, and he's bringing up relics every season. He goes out there, and depending upon the shifting sands, they find areas, and they've brought up cannons full. Amazing finds. And one thing too about pirates, the other thing is witches, and you don't often hear about witches on Cape Cod. And what I found fascinating was that while they were hanging witches in Boston, they did not hang witches on Cape Cod. They didn't do that, and I thought that was very interesting. As a matter of fact, if someone claimed that you were a witch, and your claim was found to be faulty or there was no evidence, you were fined.
Huh.
Yes, and I thought that was really interesting. And really, she was just sent off. She was jailed and she was sent off, but she wasn't jailed for witchcraft.
I'll say, I know a few witches on Cape Cod now, so they'll be happy to.
They like their witches. That's what it is. And they have for a long time. So.
In the early stages of the book, you explore the story, the legend, and the lore of Bellamy and Maria Hallett. But later on in the book, you really start to get into their identities, especially Maria's and who she might be. Yep. And with that, you start peeling away some of the layers of the legend, and you start getting to the root of where some of these symbols that are in the story might actually come about. And I thought that was really interesting because instead of just taking the story at face value, you kind of picked it apart and really saw the different allusions to other stories.
Yes, and we know that Bellamy existed. We know the ship existed. We basically know that every part of the story existed except for Maria. She's the only one for whom we don't have any documentation. And so what I wanted to focus on was I wanted to try to find her and to see if I could. And so I had to look at many different women. And first I had to pick apart, like you said, the folklore itself, and I had to look at all of the different stories and all of the allusions and the fact that they meet in an apple orchard, is sort of biblical. And so then I looked at different women of the time, and I really narrowed it down. And I really feel I have it narrowed down to two women, Mahita Brown and Mary Hallett. And I had an interesting experience when I went to the graveyard and I looked for Mary Hallett's grave. And it was early in the morning, and there are tons of Halletts on Cape Cod, and especially in Yarmouth. This is where the graveyard is, and so it took quite a long time to find her grave, you know. And then when I finally found the grave, you know, it was very early, March of last year, and I just put my hand on the grave, and this very small breeze just sort of, you know, went right through, and it really felt like that was it, you know, she was the one.
Kind of a little sign there from the other side. Yeah.
I really did, you know, it was really, really interesting, and it felt good, you know, it felt like I had her, and we do have a will from Mary Hallett, and she died as a spinster in 1751, and she died. In the will, it talks about the fact that she's going to be buried in a necklace of golden beads. And going through the research, I won't go into specifics, but basically, you know, there'd be no reason for her to have those golden beads, nor would there be a reason for her to be buried in them unless they were very sentimental to her, because as a Puritan, she would have given away everything that she had. And Ken Tinker, who is a piratologist, as they call him, and he is the curator at the museum, at the Whittam Museum, he was the one to find that will, and that, along with the fact that she also had ties to Great Island, to the tavern there, where Bellamy spent time, that she's the correct age and she's living in the right place, really sort of pinpoints her as possibly Maria Hallett. We don't know that her name was Maria because, you know, she was known as Goody Hallett for a very long time, which could have, depending upon the definition, could illustrate a married woman, but also a spinster, or just a young woman. And so there's only one other woman who I thought could be connected, Mahitable Brown. She married Hallett. She married Mary Hallett's brother, John, actually, and her uncle is John Knowles, which I found very interesting because all the stories say that Maria Hallett gave birth to her child in her uncle's barn, her uncle John Knowles. So this Mahitable Hallett, through the genealogy, her uncle is John Knowles. So I found that very interesting. And after a year, she just disappears. She marries John Hallett, and within a year, he marries someone else, and she's just gone. And she marries him in the same year that Bellamy and Maria supposedly had their affair. And he was a sailor, and he would have been away. So I wonder if something happened there, too. But after my experience in the graveyard, I really like to think that Mary Hallett is actually Maria Hallett. There is no grave for Mahitable Hallett. There's nothing for her. There's no death record. You can't find anything, but yet her husband, there's records for him and everything he does. The new marriage, his children, everything. And the only record we have of her is the marriage to John Hallett. And she just disappears.
Well, I'm sure that when you were undertaking this quest of writing Bellamy's Bride, you know, that song probably kept popping into your head from The Sound of Music.
Yes. Yep.
How do you solve a problem like Maria? So
absolutely.
But it seems like you've offered a lot of possibilities and a lot of potential. One thing that I want to ask you, you talk about the ghosts and the witches and all this stuff that's associated with this story, but what are your thoughts on the paranormal? Are you a believer that it does exist?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I am. And I am, and I've been fascinated with stories of the paranormal for a long time. For a long time. Then
I have a proposition for you.
Okay.
How about sometime in this summer, you know, when the weather's a little bit better,
yep,
we make a trek, the Spooky South Coast crew, yourself, your family, whoever you want to bring along. We all go down out to the area where you believe that Maria lived. The what's it called, Marconi Beach, is that?
Yep.
And we'll go out there with some of our equipment and some of our supposed communication devices that can get in touch with the other side, and we'll see if we can ask her some of these questions directly.
That would be very cool. I would like that very much.
Right,
that would be great.
We'll definitely do that because I'm interested, because when you're talking about somebody that might really just be a conglomeration of many other people,
Right.
or when the story is actually lost, if you have that opportunity to make some kind of connection with the other side, you can get a lot of these questions answered, and it's fun. It's really fun to be able to touch history like that. So
yes, it is, and I wanted to give her a voice because all of the stories focus mainly on the pirate. They focus on the ship, and she's always just sort of like a little footnote, and there was no one place that you could go to find her story. What's her story? What are the legends? What's the possibility of reality? And so I wanted to sort of give her a voice and give her a place.
Well, I think you've done a great job of that. If anybody out there is not from the area, you'll get a great idea from this book of what Cape Cod people are like then, and I can tell you they're not really that much different now.
No, they're not.
I lived down there for a few years, and I can tell you firsthand. And it's also it's such an extremely haunted area. Everywhere you go, there's ghosts, and they're old ghosts. They're historical ghosts, but you never feel put off by them. It's very enveloping and very embracing.
Yes, that's exactly the way I felt in the graveyard. It was just a very good feeling.
Well, maybe it's because it's surrounded by all that. We can get into all the theories of why it's so haunted some other time, but we'll definitely take you up on going out there and researching some of this and seeing some of these sites. And anybody out there who wants to join in, maybe we'll set something up in the summertime when it's nice and we can actually get outside and have some fun.
That would be great. And Clifford's book on the Witta, he has some very interesting sort of paranormal experiences as he's researching.
Excellent.
Yep. So
you can't see. That's the thing.
Cool.
You can never get too far from the ghosts when you're talking about
right.
history. The book is called Bellamy's Bride: The Search for Maria Hallett of Cape Cod. The author is Kathleen Brunelle. You can go to her website, KathleenBrunelle.com, linked up on SpookySouthcoast.com. You can also get it locally at stores like, I know the Sea Witch has it. There must be some other ones in the area if you want to.
Yep, I know they had them at Baker Books and.
Of course, Baker Books, right? Yeah.
Yep, and also at Borders and those stores in the area too, and also on the website. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can't find it anywhere else, you can get it on the website. That's the best way to get a copy. And we'll. Have you set up anything for a signing at the Sea Witch yet? I know Marcia wanted to get you in there.
No, I definitely want to go down there. It's one of my. I love that store. I love that store, and I was so happy when I found out she was carrying the book. So that's great. It's such a great store.
Well, thank you for giving us a paranormally themed love story that we could share here right before Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, and good luck with everything, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Have a great night.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Kathleen Brunelle again, the author of Bellamy's Bride: The Search for Maria Hallett of Cape Cod. Coming up, we're going to explore a little bit later on in the area's history. We're going to talk about the Revolutionary War and 4 brave former slaves who fought and defended this burgeoning country back then, and the land they were given in Plymouth, and what it means to people of today and what they're trying to build there as well. With our guest, Wayne Ibn Musa Barboza. He's the vice president of an organization called Parting Ways. So we're going to talk about that, and believe it or not, there's some paranormal connections to that story as well. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more. We'll also tell you a little bit more about Dead of Winter. If you haven't heard all the details yet, you'll know them by the end of tonight. Only 4 tickets left. GhostVillage.com/Lizzie. What are you waiting for? They're going to be gone. Monize's Beard is going to buy 2 of them. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, Citadel Broadcasting, AM 1420, WBSM.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson.
There's no power like the power of the people.
Celebrating Egypt's big changes, demonstrations around the world, these in Indianapolis. While there's also a cleanup effort in Cairo's Tahrir Square, a big happy crowd remains. President Obama welcomed commitments from Egypt's new military rulers to eventually hand over power to an elected government, though no indication when. ABC's Jim Sciutto in Cairo.
The military council trying simultaneously to soothe concerns overseas and at home. Internationally, says it will honor all of its peace agreements, including, crucially, that 79 agreement with Israel. At home, a promise to ensure a transition to a free, democratic state, the goal that those protesters have been fighting for since the very beginning.
In Yemen, where close to 1,000 protesters took to the streets, some fights broke out. Upping pressure on Iran's government, National Security Advisor Tom Donilon saying by not allowing opposition protests, Iran's declared illegal for Iranians what it claimed was noble for Egyptians. Iranian students have been trying to organize a big demonstration Monday. The U.S. condemns Syria for the secret trial of a young blogger, calling the spy charges against Tal al-Malahi spurious. Her blog, known for poetry and social commentary and focused on Palestinians. Syria's never said for what countries she allegedly spied. The second year in a row, Congressman Ron Paul, Texas Republican, has won the presidential straw poll at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington. Paul got 30% of the vote. Former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney was second with 23%. ABC's Tamon Bradley in D.C.
There were about 11,000 conservative activists there, but it's such a small sampling of the kinds of people who would show up in a Republican primary. You'll see the kinds of people who might vote in Iowa, for instance. But Ron Paul also won the CPAC straw poll last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll get the Republican presidential nomination if he runs.
You're listening to ABC News.
Can you get long-lasting pain relief without taking pills all day? Yes, with Thermacare heat wraps.
I was surprised. I got real relief without pills.
I could actually feel the real heat of Thermacare relax and unlock my tight muscles.
Over 8 hours, Thermacare is more effective for back pain than the maximum dose of acetaminophen, the medicine, and Tylenol.
No pills, no pain, just relief.
Try Thermacare heat wraps. Go to thermacare.com for a $3 off coupon now. Use as directed.
Jay Farner here with Quicken Loans. The rate today on a 7-year adjustable rate mortgage is an amazing 3.75%, APR 3.52%. So give Quicken Loans a call today at 800-970-8011 or go to quickenloans.com and ask about the incredible advantages of our 7-year ARM. One more way Quicken Loans is engineered to amaze.
Adjustable rate mortgage rate information is variable and subject to change. Call Quicken Loans to get additional cost information. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. Nationwide mortgage licensing system number 3030.
A school busing dispute in North Carolina.
The NAACP led about 90 different groups in a march to the State House in Raleigh, North Carolina. They're opposed to a move by the Wake County School Board to end a student diversity plan supporters call a model for the nation. NAACP President Benjamin Jella says the Tea Party-influenced school board is trying to resegregate.
People here want one county, they want one state, they want one country, and we intend to fight with them until we get there.
The Wake County School Board defended its move as an attempt to allow children to attend schools that are closer to home. Richard Cantu, ABC News.
Death and weirdness at a racetrack. One fan.
Sad, isn't it? It's just sad.
There's an investigation into why 2 horses collapsed and died today before a race in Newbury, England. Newbury Racecourse manager Stephen Higgins says the horses may have been electrocuted because of their metal shoes touching the wet ground of the track.
It seems to have been some kind of reaction in a particular part of the parade ring. We've had the SCB, the electricity board here, establishing whether or not there is a cable there and whether that cable's been disturbed.
Postmortem examinations being done on the horses, too. Washington state lawmakers looking into the possibility of allowing people to smoke cigars and pipes at some cigar lounges and tobacco shops. The Seattle Times says cigarettes would still be banned. There would be designated smoking areas. Cost for shops to apply for the special state endorsement allowing cigar smoking, $15,000. For cigar lounges, $5,000. This is ABC News.
Does your roof need replacing? Your house need cleaning? Or maybe you're ready to update your kitchen? Big or small, whatever your home improvement need, log on to home.servicemagic.com. ServiceMagic is a free online resource with instant access to pre-screened remodelers, maids, handymen, painters, and many other home contractors. It's easy and it's free. Just go to home.servicemagic.com. home.servicemagic.com. That's home.servicemagic.com.
Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
This heavyweight bout is about to begin. The challenger wears white trunks with a blue stripe, and the champ is wearing, looks like an examination gown from the doctor's office. And from the back, we can... Ooh, that's not pretty. Champ, what's with the crazy getup?
I've got to take care of my family.
Yeah, so?
Well, when you love your family, you got to go in and get those important medical screenings. A lot of potentially deadly diseases can be treated if you catch them in time.
So you wear the examination gown because...
Because I'm a real man. Real men take care of their families and get those tests. Real men wear gowns.
Okay, champ, good luck. Here we go. The champ's not wasting any time. Oh, it's over. This fight is over. Champ, you barely broke a sweat. Any words for your fans out there?
Remember, go to ahrq.gov for a list of the tests they need to get and when to get them.
What was that web address again?
ahrq.gov. And remember, real men wear gowns.
Go to ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, AHRQ, and the Ad Council.
Prices are up. The cost of running your business is up. Everything's up, except your marketing budget. So what's a small business to do? Email marketing to your current customers with ConstantContact.com. With Constant Contact, you get professional-looking email newsletters that keep your customers coming back. Plus, there's a free 60-day trial with plans as low as $15 a month. So even if the economy's down, your sales don't have to be. Put your marketing on the upswing with ConstantContact.com.
Whether you run a small business or a big enterprise, you face similar IT challenges every day, including network security, user productivity, network and application performance, and data storage and email retrieval. That's why over 70,000 businesses like yours count on Barracuda Networks to solve these challenges. Right out of the box, without IT expertise, at a price that any business can afford. Call 888-ANTI-SPAM for a free 30-day trial of any of our security, productivity, or storage appliances. That's 888-ANTI-SPAM, or see for yourself at barracuda.com.
AM 1420, WBSM. Available anywhere and anytime at WBSM.com. Just one click gives you local news and weather, national and world news, business and entertainment news, and of course, sports. WBSM.com has the Pete Braley and Ken Pittman blogs, chances to save with half-price hookup and iBid, and even ways to win. One click does it all from anywhere at any time. WBSM.com.
Run! Save yourself! It's coming!
Frankie, what's wrong with you?
The April tax deadline, it's getting so close, and I haven't even started my paperwork.
Oh, no!
Pardon all the drama, but if you've waited until the last minute to do your taxes, there's a better alternative to pure panic. Just go to www.irs.gov, your reliable source for all things taxes.
Get a grip, Frankie! We'll figure it out.
But the forms, the math, it's terrifying! Ah!
That's www.irs.gov, where you'll find all the information you need, like how to e-file your taxes so you don't miss that April deadline. All the forms are there, too, including the 4868, the one you need to file for an extension.
See, Frankie? There is hope.
We're gonna make it.
Spooky Southcoast is back.
It's Saturday night. I have no date. A 2-liter bottle of Shasta and my all-rush mixtape. Let's rock.
I can smell your fears. I'm not afraid. You will be. Welcome to Spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky Southcoast. Let's see if I can get it right this time. I'm Matt Costa. He's Tim Weisberg. The silent assassin Matt Costa. Science advisor Matt Moniz and his beard. So if you're watching Spooky TV, you can see that thing in living color. And there's actually a couple of different colors in it. So, oh, there he goes. And we just went from hundreds of viewers to 3. Thanks for staying in there, Chris. We had a great first hour talking with Kathleen Brunelle, the author of Bellamy's Bride, The Search for Maria Hallett. And we're going to be talking about parting ways in just a few minutes. But before we do that, we want to share with you a little bit more information about the Dead of Winter event. It's coming up on February 26th at the Lizzie Board and Bed and Breakfast in Fall River, Mass. It's being presented by Spooky Southcoast and GhostVillage.com, which means that Jeff Belanger will be in the house. And if you've ever been around Jeff Belanger at an event, you know that's worth the price of admission alone. And if that wasn't enough for you, we're also going to have Bill Chappell's new Spiricom that people can actually use on the investigation that night. It's going to be dinner. It's going to be investigating. It's going to be lectures, not necessarily in that order. It's going to be a chance to use Spiricom. It's going to be a chance to learn some different approaches to paranormal investigation, or if you've never actually investigated, doing it for the first time yourself. And I'm just excited. I was looking over some of the guests that are coming to this, and it's going to be a real mix of seasoned veterans. And, and as Dave said, it's a chance to touch the beard in person. The beard will be there, actually signing autographs. Moniz, I don't know if he's going to make it, but the beard will be there. And you may even, if you're lucky enough, find pieces of it in your dinner. So, can we make sure that doesn't happen, Matt Costa? Producer and co-chef of this event. I say co like I'm really going to help. But and of course, as we mentioned on previous shows, you're also going to have my wife's Oreo brownies available to you, also worth the price of admission alone. There's 4 tickets left, $125 a ticket. You got to go to ghostvillage.com/Lizzie or call the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, and you'll be able to get some of those 4 remaining tickets. I also want to throw a couple of shout-outs. Is that what the kids say? Shout-outs out there? First of all, I want to thank our friend Dave Schrader at Darkness on the Edge of Town Radio for promoting the event this week and having Jeff and Leanne Wilbur, the owner of the house, on, talking about the history of the case and the ghosts. And you know, Dave being in Minnesota, and also, you know, people listen to him nationally and internationally. You know, a chance for another part of the world to get more of the Lizzie Borden story, more than just what we hear in the nursery rhyme. So thank you for that. Also want to say thank you to Thomas O'Callahan, who emailed from Manchester. No, not Manchester, New Hampshire. Not Manchester by the Sea. We're talking about Manchester, England. And he's a loyal listener, so we want to say hello to him for dropping us a line. And Ray J, our good friend Ray J, who is one of our biggest fans, and we appreciate it, brother. That's I can't express enough just how great your email made our day feel. But he wants to know why there's no Spooky South Coast Wikipedia page. And I know, Matt Costa, you and I both tried to do it, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to start posting stuff up on Wikipedia. It used to be easy. I remember I used to be able to go on there and delete stuff about Moniz all the time. But then, you know, for some reason...
So you're the one that kept deleting that on me.
I did. Well, because, you know...
You know how many times I had to rewrite that?
But it wasn't true. So, and I couldn't let you misrepresent yourself like that. You know? No matter how many times you put it, nobody was going to believe that you were Mickey Rourke's stunt double in the Pope of Greenwich Village. What are you laughing about? You were Eric Roberts' stunt double. They actually took your thumb.
My thumb.
They took my thumb, Charlie. By the way, we could almost do a whole hour on the Trailer Park Boys after last night. That was hysterical.
It was hilarious.
Netflix. It's all on.
Is it?
All from Netflix. Write that down. But anyway. So we want to say hi to him, Ray J, for suggesting that. We're going to try and do what we can to get something up there. Maybe one of our listeners out there is a Wikipedia contributor and can send me an email, and I'll tell you what kind of stuff to put up there. Because we only want true stuff, you know, like, you know, that I'm 135 pounds and 6'2". And I am the guy that plays the flute. All right, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we will get into some serious history talk with Wayne Ibn Musa Barboza, the vice president of Parting Ways, and we're going to talk about something that I never learned about, and I lived in Plymouth growing up. I read the history books that they gave you in Plymouth Public Schools, and I never heard about this. And as much as, you know, I was embarrassed about how little we knew about King Philip's War, I'm even more embarrassed that we don't know anything about the 4 gentlemen that we'll be talking about. These 4 souls, 4 brave souls, former slaves who defended our country in the Revolutionary War and the efforts to build a museum in their honor on the site. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about that. We'll also take your calls. The phone lines are going to be open, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can also email us spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com or jump in the chat room at spookysouthcoast.com/spookytv. We'll be right back with more.
From what grave did I come? Or what evil mixture was I compounded? I have the time, all the time I need.
When I broke my neck in a diving accident over 40 years ago, people would approach my bedside in different ways. Hi, this is Johnny Erickson Tata, and some of my friends had a lot of good advice, but good as it was, their counsel went right over my head. because I was too emotionally turned upside down to make heads or tails out of their well-meaning words. I'm sure the advice made great sense to them, and no doubt they were anxious to see a smile on my face or want to see a happier attitude from me, but I was not ready for advice. I was still mourning. I was still grieving the loss of not having use of my hands or legs. I needed time to cry, time to think. And oh, how I appreciated those friends who did not come into my hospital to fix anything or fix me. Often they did not have any words to say. They just came to spend time with me. They cared. And from disabilitycampaign.org, let me say that you can care too.
Hi, this is Scott Lang, Mayor of the City of New Bedford. Have you checked your medicine cabinet lately? You should. Every day, more than 2,500 teenagers abuse prescription medication for the first time. Sadly, teens often experiment with medications they find right at home. Many young people think it's safer to misuse prescription medications than illegal street drugs, but that simply is not true. Prescription medications can be beneficial when used under a doctor's supervision, but misusing medications can lead to addiction, overdose, and even death. Fortunately, there are steps you can take to help protect your children. Keep track of your medications. Encourage friends and relatives to safeguard medications in their homes. And consult your pharmacist about disposing of medications you no longer need. Remember, prescription drug abuse is still drug abuse. If you don't want your children to abuse prescription medications, don't give them the opportunity.
A community service of New Bedford, the Partnership for a Drug-Free America, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. To learn more, go to drugfree.org.
AM 1420, WBSM, and A&A Jewelers in Dartmouth are making this Valentine's Day a day worthy of its name. How about a 5-night romantic getaway to the Hamptons and the luxurious Montauk Yacht Club Resort and Marina? A bottle of champagne awaits your arrival at this world-class beachfront retreat. And the runner-up prize is special too. It's a $1,000 diamond necklace from A&A Jewelers in the Dartmouth Town Center. To win, just text I love 68683. That's I love 68683. Winners chosen at random from all text entries on Valentine's weekend. Official rules at WBSM.com. Text I love 68683 and have a happy Valentine's Day with A&A Jewelers and AM 1420 WBSM.
I feel like it's all on my shoulders. How am I going to take care of my parents if they develop an eye disease like glaucoma? Glaucoma is the leading cause of blindness in African Americans and Hispanics in the United States. And what about my kids? Will they inherit it? Not to mention my risk factor. I'm really concerned and I need some answers.
Call 1-800-437-2423 or go to ahaf.org for answers, including a free brochure on glaucoma.
In the beloved fairy tale classic, Beauty and the Beast, Belle is imprisoned in the castle of a mysterious beast. But with the assistance of the castle's enchanted staff, the two become unlikely friends, discover that true beauty is found within, and they live happily ever after.
Today, our happily ever afters are being threatened by the fact that nearly 1 in 3 children in America are overweight or obese. Now more than ever, it's time to make good nutrition and physical activity part of your family's daily lifestyle. Do things like eat dinner together, add fruits and veggies to every meal, save treats for special occasions, and get up and play an hour each day. Be our guest to healthy living and visit letsmove.gov to learn more. That's letsmove.gov. This message has been brought to you by Let's Move, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Ad Council.
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky South Coast is back.
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin, Matt Costa, science advisor, Matt Moniz. And joining us on the phone now is Wayne Ibn Musa Barboza, the vice president of Parting Ways. And you can check out their website while we talk, partingways.org. They're also on Facebook and on Twitter. And you can find out all the information about Parting Ways, the organization, what they do, the site, what they're trying to preserve. But we're going to talk with Mr. Barboza now about all that. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you.
I first learned about Parting Ways through Jack Spillane's column in last Sunday Standard Times, and I have to apologize for that being the first time that I've ever heard of it. Actually, as I mentioned before, growing up in Plymouth, and I went to Plymouth Public Schools in my elementary years, and I don't ever remember hearing about it from any of my teachers.
Well, that's not something surprising to me, because Parting Ways is one of the nation's biggest secrets. It connects to the founding fathers. I think you know by the little research you may have done that the people that fought in the actual war was only 3 to 5% of the people. Mm-hmm. And of that 3 to 5%, 5% were African Americans. Now, it only makes sense that during slavery time, that some of these men were fighting for the landowners and the slave owners. And when the war was over, Washington made sure that each town gave these men some land, their freedom, and provisions like any other veterans. You know, so what it boils down to, over time, it all evolved into the town owning the lands.
And is that how it would go? Even though they would kind of bequeath these land to the soldiers that fought, it was still technically the town that owned the property?
Well, actually, they waited, like they do now. They wait until the people who know the real story die off. You follow what I'm saying?
I think I see what you mean,
yeah. Yeah, they die off. If you don't write in the history books, of course, all you have to do is sit on the sidelines and wait for the people who witnesses to die off, and you got one story.
But when I'm hearing this story, you know, as I said, for the first time, it seems to me, though, that it's probably representative of something that happened in a lot of areas, in a lot of communities, where, you know, these African-American soldiers, these freed slaves who defended the country, were given an honorarium, but then eventually shuffled away from the history books.
Yeah, you got it. And the only time this comes up is once a year. You know, we have the shortest month of the year. We have the Black History. And because we have icons, the founding fathers, you can't shake them any more than you can shake the office of the president, you know, get in trouble. And a lot of politics took place over the generations on how they got that land, because it ain't just Plymouth. There's Kingston's involved, and in fact, I'm in Rhode Island, and the Newport Tower has a great history ties into this Portsmouth Memorial, which is dedicated to Black patriots.
Well,
now, the whole nation doesn't need to have a memorial. This is only hidden here in Rhode Island.
I don't understand why when, you know, it's not like these men were, you know, still enslaved at the time that they served, and that they were kind of being forced to serve. I mean, these are gentlemen who did not have to do this. They enlisted to defend this country, a country that the whole reason they were here was because they were forced to be here originally. Yet they loved the idea of this country enough to fight, and I can't understand why that isn't being honored.
Well, that's the whole problem. This is what began the whole story about Parting Ways. At the time, I was busy doing activism with the youth and so forth when I first heard about it. And when they took me up there, I only had Crispus Attucks, the Boston Massacre, you know, the basic stuff. Mm-hmm. And to tell me after going to the Mia March and knowing most of the people that were organizing this big event, and none of them knew anything about this history, just blew me away. All right? So when I went out to Plymouth, here we are in the middle of the woods, and we find these graves. And there's not 4 graves, there's 5. Okay? Now, we do a little bit of research, and we find out from the library there's 4 file cabinets of virgin documents, such as birth records, deeds, et cetera, that were hidden in the library by the library keeper who just resigned at that particular time. And she said there was bundles that were thrown away of African American and Native American history. There was tons of stuff thrown away. And this was the last remnants before she retired. She hung on to it. And she kept these file cabinets right in her booth, you know, her little compartment where she worked in the library. So now I wondered, how come these archives weren't documented and, you know, put in for public view, you know, for research?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we finally got the drawers open, because they had been closed for a long time, we looked at these things have never been touched. I mean, if you pull the paper, it's brittle. It's all handwritten documents. So, of course, that's going to lead you to dig and research more. So the more digging we did, we found out there was a specific reason why they didn't want the black founding fathers or the black veterans in the history of America's foundation, because it tied in with the slave issue. Because there would there would be no. I mean, it took 30 acres of hemp just to provide the rope for one ship. Now, who's picking all that hemp?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a lot of labor involved. And when you talk about the Wampanoags and the Cape Verdeans and so forth that have been living there, we're going back to 1100, not 1492 and not 1620, 1100. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this history, like the Wampanoags and the Narragansett and so forth, has been suppressed because it's talking about the people who were native to the land when these Europeans arrived. You follow?
Absolutely.
Okay, now, we basically know a little bit about it these days. But what we don't know is the occult side. There was an occult side. You know, the burning witches and the protesters from that came here, called Protestants and Pilgrims and so on, they all had their own religious beliefs, and they were looking for freedom too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The same reason why anybody, like the Egyptians, they fighting for freedom. They're not fighting because they had to fight. You give me a gun and I'm a slave, I'm running away. These guys were fighting for freedom and the promise of some land, an opportunity. And this goes way back. So anyway, just to get back on the Parting Ways land, there was too many mysteries, too many cover-ups, and the curators of the museums and the Plymouth Plantation didn't want to bring this history out. And it took years for me to finally get to the point where the Sons of the American Revolution accepted the idea that we weren't going to give up on this story. So they collaborated with us, and they recognized it, and we're working with them now. So, long story short, once the Sons of the American Revolution recognized and gave due honors and respect to that site, they also had a ceremony which was never seen before in public at the New Bedford Whaling Museum in 2006 on Patriots Day. At that time, they reinstated W.E. Du Bois, who was one of the first African Americans in the SARS organization. They also reinstated all 5,000, an estimated 5,000 veterans who fought, so that they would be eligible to be members of SARS. Now, SARS is not just the descendants of the bloodline of these revolutionary founding fathers. They were also the bloodlines of aristocrats from Europe and England. Mm-hmm. And they were very deeply involved with the Masonics, Templars, Knights of Christ, all the way to John Dee. And this is where Cape Verdean oral history kicks in. All right. They have an oral history, which is a Portuguese African dialect called Creole. Mm-hmm. And they sing musical songs that have ancient vibrations in the drums, the beats, the sounds, the cymbals, and so on. And it kept bringing back this museum that's located in Plymouth where the articles they were shown, they kept ringing a bell to me because they were vases, the same kind of vases you see at the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know. And they were calling it Tamaran Johns that came from Caribbean area, which ain't true. You know what I mean? So when we went to the curators of the museum, the Plymouth Plantation, you name it, historical societies, nobody had information, and the ones that didn't want to give it up. And we're talking about learning institutions like UMass Boston, Dartmouth, Brown University, and so on. Now, they've been holding on to these artifacts and this information and had a couple of digs. Each time they have a dig, they're keeping this information and putting it aside. Because you can't do the Parting Ways story or the story of these black patriots without rewriting the entire history of the founding of this country, which discloses a Masonic occult founding.
Now, this sounds like something that we've discussed with other people off the air. And actually, in full disclosure, I'm actually standing next to a Mason now, and Matt Moniz has been a member for a few years now, and I try to get the secrets out of him, and I can't. And I know he knows them.
Well, that's the whole thing. These days, and I'm sure you'll have to agree with me, the Masonics are anxious to get information and to bring new life and new blood into their lodges because the jig is up. You know, they know that the history has to be recovered and rewritten, that our icons weren't, gods, and they were humans, and they had, they had another side. But most importantly, how it ties in is the denying these veterans, because this is what Parting Ways is all about, denying these veterans, these founding fathers, who evidently fought side by side with Indians, blacks, even women, during the Revolution, before the Revolution, and working under Washington, were given sovereignty as a citizen in this new nation. That can't be taken away. That's why the land is under the control of the Department of Interior. Okay? Now, when I got the book on the Department of Interior puts out on African information, it had nothing about the slave trade when it came to the Cape Verdean Islands. In fact, even the maps excluded the islands. It excluded the words, excluded the culture, etc. And this is the most important part. Cape Verde is where the slave trade began.
Really?
Yes. A lot of people think that the slave trade, as they call it, started when Columbus come over here and, took the land. Now they needed blacks. But it's the other way around, okay? First off, they weren't doing no trade. It was a kidnapping. And that didn't take place until after they had killed off many tribes, the Arawak, the Wampanoag, the Batuque. The Batuque especially the women were taken to Cape Verde for a hybrid experiment to create a brown-skinned hybrid of their own that they could trust, so they could turn their back and let them do the labor. And they had to teach these Cape Verdeans as their own children, all right, how to navigate ships, how to control the slave products and services that they had to provide. Like anybody, they got a little money, they're going to pay people to do the work. Why not get a son or a daughter? You know what I mean? So they were, even up until the 70s, Cape Verdean people actually had on their birth certificate that they were Caucasians. And they were treated entirely different from the African Americans. They believed that, like the British African immigrants believe that they're British. You know what I'm I'm saying?
Oh, I know what you mean.
Especially if you're Portuguese, you know the Knights Templar or the Knights of Christ from the Portuguese Castle of Timor. These were the Sinclair tribes.
Well,
are you familiar with them?
Yeah, well, I've heard of them in some of the literature that I've read on the Templars.
Well, they built the Newport Tower. In fact, this winter solace, there was a lunar eclipse that took place at 10-something the night before the Venus alignment. And some of the, in fact, I can tell you the name of the person. He's the editor of the Masonic Lodge here in East Providence. He does the paper or something. And he's the one that gave the tour to the so-called initiates, because who else would be out there that time in the morning in the freezing snow? Gave the tour to the initiates when we arrived. Now, because of my shamanistic skills, you might say, I catch these ceremonies during their alignments and astrological rituals and so forth. I've been catching them as an invited guest, and they have to accept. You ever hear the widow's son?
No.
Well, your boy's right there. Ask him if he ever heard a widow's son.
I am familiar with what you were referencing.
Well, you're being quiet, my friend.
He might be under orders to be quiet.
Well, you swear, no? I mean, there's nothing devious behind this.
No.
A cult doesn't mean bad. It just means hidden, secret, something they keep sacred to themselves. But the idea that you're keeping the labor, the sacrifices, the deeds, and all these things that were heritage for the African Americans that live in this country today, and to look at how you say, these stats say that you have to have a 2 point something to be sustainable as a race. Mm-hmm. And here we had 1.6, and they kill off 150,000 a day, at the birth control centers and planning. All this is going on in our community. Why? To keep a story quiet? To keep the history, keep these icons looking like gods? You follow where I'm coming from?
No, I definitely do.
So parting ways has been suppressed because of this. Because you can't, just like the Indians, you cannot tell the true story without destroying the lying story.
Well, the mythology that they've built up.
Okay, we'll call it mythology.
But part of that, though, is, that so often when it comes to telling the true story of history is just told by whoever wrote the story at the time. And that's kind of why it's his story, because he's the one that wrote it. He's the one that told it. And for the mindset that they had at the time when they were recording all this information, it took 200 years after these gentlemen were given this land before even that mindset began to even remotely be wiped away.
Okay, but we're in the 21st century. The race is over. Mm-hmm. We're a human race. All right? Now, as Americans, don't you think we should revisit this little problem? We should discuss this. This should be on the table somewhere where these soldiers could be recognized.
Absolutely.
Well, what is stopping it if you don't think there's something big? If it's not a conspiracy, what is stopping congressmen and senators and veterans organizations for 70? I mean, well, we're talking. I got involved. The history goes back to 72. Our charter goes back to 1972. In fact, the people that were back there in 72 weren't famous. They were called Dick Gregory, but nobody knew him. Spike Lee, but nobody knew him. I can name a few other great leaders. Jesse Jackson. They all knew about this. But when they got the land and was supposed to build a museum, entities, so to speak, sidetracked them with success. Mm-hmm. And they kind of forgot about the mission. And this kept happening for 30-something years. Okay? Now, only me and this brother, who's the president now, with two veterans who were trying to get this story told, have been working on it for the past 10 years. And no matter where we turn, no matter black governor, don't matter what race you are, nothing. This is a story that, for some reason, denies these veterans of the recognition and their descendants, the heritage of that recognition.
And that's what's the most amazing about this story is that I looked up some of the information in your history on partingways.org, and for 30 years now, over 30 years, it's been recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. And you would think that that alone would get the ball rolling to have some sort of museum built there. And reading Jack Spillane's column, you see how many different legislators and how many different governors and senators and whoever this has been brought up before. It seems like everybody kind of gives you that initial promise to help.
Well, I believe they have good intent. Mm-hmm. But you got to look at the, let's say, legal side. And I can actually name names now because, God bless him, he passed. Kennedy stopped this thing back in the 70s basically because the African Americans during that time were treated with deliberate indifference. And the Cape Verdeans were like the only mediators between the races at that time. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to build the nuclear power plant up there. Now, the old man that kept this history alive, Andre's family, he just died the other day. He's 5 generations. His children worked in the dig and everything. The point is that they were discredited. They lost their jobs. They actually took a case all the way to the Supreme Court and fought it himself, and virtually won it. But the compensation thing changed with the politicians. You follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
All right. So, in the history behind it, where Bechtel, now remember, Bechtel back then was building these nuclear plants and so on. And this ties to the same people that spilled this stuff up the Gulf, you know, in the underground digging they're doing in these secret sites and so forth. These are the same people. They've taken the native lands and the people's culture and their whole background and heritage, and they've industrialized and commercialized it for profit, which is normal for, today. We understand that commercialism, it's
necessary evil, I guess you could say.
Yeah, necessary. But where were the percentage, the 5% of African American jobs? Where in fact, Plymouth Plantation refuses to recognize parting ways as a part of Plymouth history. Now, why is that?
Man, that to me, that's the most inexcusable part. It's one thing to have these politicians that are happy to shake your hand and promise you to look into funding and then not deliver. We've kind of come to expect that from politicians. But when you have an organization whose sole purpose it is to, perpetuate the history of the Plymouth colony, you can't ignore part of the Plymouth colony.
But it's one thing to say what is right and moral, but if it's not being in practice, it's just talk. And this is what's been happening. These politicians and people have good intent when they start, but somewhere up the chain, someone says, squash it. I haven't seen in the past 11 years one dime donated towards this effort. And the ones that do support it, such as the Sons of the American Revolution and the Daughters of Dar and all these veterans organizations that have been involved, they just invite us so that they can appear as though blacks are now being involved.
Well, you say that you haven't seen a dime of donations. You mean from the government and from these organizations?
Any organization, from any. I'm saying any. And we're a nonprofit since 1972.
But you must have some private individuals who are putting up donations.
most of the individuals that are involved that are putting up anything is coming out of their pocket are the members of Parting Ways.
So that should show these other organizations that there is, people who are supporting this, who are passionate about this. You know what it boils down to? We know what everything boils down to. A group like Plymouth Plantation or some of these legislators, they look at it and they say, it's a nice idea, and when we need the PR move, we can do it. But for now, we look at it, and it's not really going to be a sustainable economic thing for us to invest the money in. If we thought we were going to start getting $20 a ticket to have people go through there like they do at Plymouth Plantation, it'd be a different story. And that's how it works.
No, I beg to disagree with you on that.
You don't.
Oh no! I'll give you an example. The one memorial that's dedicated to the Black Patriots in this country is located in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. I don't think they have a black population up there, but it's way out. Okay, and it's in the middle of two highways. Okay, there's no structures around it for you to really park or to sit or anything like that. But it's built so geometric. It's on ley lines. It has a square door where you could walk through a portal. On one side, it has the other side has the image of the black. It's a beautiful memorial, but nobody goes there. No school buses. No kids know about it, except for what we put out there. It's not promoted, not even by the ones who will support us at events. And these events, because it's usually televised or it's public and it's political, and they look bad. So, we kind of use each other. Mm-hmm. But as far as money, you put your money where your mouth is. And I can hold in my hand 5 fingers and tell you one of those fingers ain't paying. These are the members. Okay? The board,
that would be the thumb, right?
Excuse me?
That would be the thumb, right?
It seems like that. It seems like that. But you're talking about guys that have been dying off trying to sell this story, who have been ruining their personal and family fortunes trying to get this thing out there, and they're not professionals. Professionals take it, get your grant to store it somewhere and archive it, and just get the money every year, get another grant, put a little paper out on it, and just keep it in the university.
Well, it seems like this museum, aside from recognizing these individuals, and we should let people know who they were: Plato Turner, Cato Howe, Prince Goodwin, and Kwame Quash.
And there's a 5th grade.
And the 5th grade hasn't been determined with a name. Is that?
Well, this is the controversy. Now, my research tells me that they're not even the graves.
Okay. Just markers that were put on that land?
My research tells me that land was very important. In fact, every bit of the land that was given by this proclamation that Washington told the towns to do were specifically, back in those days, they put them on ley lines. They call them energy lines, whatever, geometric lines. And supposedly it generates good energy. Okay? They build their churches, they build their temples, they cast on these lines. Well, that land happens to line up with some very significant sites. Okay? And we're talking about the Newport Tower, the Kensington Runestone, Stonian. These things are lining up for a reason. And the Templars and these researchers today are finding out they also align to the stars and astrology and things like that. Now, what do they know that they would want to just wipe out an entire group of people from their history books? Who got that land? For example, the first thing built on that land was a road that divided. Okay? Then later on, they put a school, a Catholic school. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, where did they get permission? Because the Department of Interior didn't give it to them. You wouldn't build on a cemetery or another historical site, would you?
You're talking building the school.
Building a private school. a religious one at that. You know what I'm saying? A parochial school.
And for those who are familiar with the area, we're talking about, this is on Route 80 in Plymouth.
Right.
We're talking about the Sacred Heart High School.
Right.
And I can tell you, I've gone down that road many, many times over the years because it was kind of my back way to a lot of things, and I never realized that Parting Ways was even there.
Oh, there's a lot more to this land deal, trust me. In fact, they was getting ready to, when I came in the picture, they were getting ready to build a crematorium across the road from the cemetery. And when you look at the condition the site was in, you couldn't find it. You had to push it like a outback. You know what I mean? To get into the site, there was no parking. You had to park on the side of the road on an angle because there was no parking space. We made them put a sign, and they put a little small 10 by 20 sign. So we built one, and I built it personally. Put a big white sign there so people could see it. Made them put a parking lot or clear the land. And we did a few other little beautifications up there. And we started doing ceremonies and rituals at events like Thanksgiving and so on, etc. But as far as getting support, in fact, they even closed the museum where they have the artifacts that are Parting Ways, exhibits are. They closed it. You could look in the window and see it. Mm-hmm. And it's been closed. So now the question is, the way they're treating this, as though there is a deliberate attempt to keep this quiet. Now, I would like to know why, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Well, then what happens, and I'll tell you another thing. I've gone to many, many organizations in 3 or 4 states. I'm a tri-stater. And I've been to many, many organizations that's supposed to help and represent blacks. And when they first hear the story, they're all excited and enthusiastic to work with it. And when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, they won't even return your phone calls. Now, what happens?
Even the Tuskegee Institute?
Oh, definitely. This Rhode Island Airmen's thing, they got radio shows. I talked to all them guys, and they'll talk to me. Yeah. I had to put my own TV on show on because they wouldn't even invite me or call me back. There's more to it, trust me. I mean, you're talking about rewriting history, number one, and there's millions of dollars in textbooks, curriculum, and so forth. All right?
Textbooks that aren't telling the whole story, by the way.
Huh?
Textbooks that aren't telling the whole story, by the way.
They are deliberately not telling the whole story. It's deliberate.
Well, I mean, but if it's not going to be paid for by any of these organizations, if they're not going to get behind it and support it, then it has to be grassroots. It has to be the individuals who make it happen.
Exactly. Well, this is what we've been doing. We've been doing grassroots. In fact, we made it clear that the intent that these soldiers, if in fact the land was given to them for that purpose, should be farming, agriculture, and a lifestyle that was intended for their children. So I don't know if you saw on the website, we have a vision of what we want to do on the land. Mm-hmm. We want to have a couple of acres of just pure organic foods. And we want to have windmills and solar panels on a conference center. So instead of these organizations going to Ramada Inn and Holiday Inn and paying a fortune for a conference or event, they can have it on this land. People, instead of going to parks, they can go to this beautifully landscaped place. You know what I'm talking about? Yep. Even fish farms. You know what I mean? Because I know food is going to be an issue for us.
Well, I know that if enough, people get behind this vision and enough people support it, I've seen things happen grassroots style. I've seen things happen in spite of something trying to hold it down. And I think that this is something that once more people become aware of it, you'll see that happen. How can people, because we are up against the end of the show here, how can people get involved if they want to? If they want to make a donation, if they want to get involved with the organization, do whatever they can to help?
Well, again, they can contact us through the website, or I could give you an address. But like I said, all the information's out there. Mm-hmm. We're a nonprofit. Not that we're looking for federal handouts and dictation and all that stuff. But any dime, 10 cents, it just makes you feel good. You know, somebody cares.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I recently got a donation as far away as Florida. And it came at a time, because we give our DVDs away free. We go out to events and in front of schools and so forth, especially this month, and give away thousands of DVDs with this history on it. Okay? Now, that comes out of two people's pockets. Okay? So if I can do that, one more person might be able to do double that.
Mm-hmm.
And one more person might be able to double. I'm on a fixed income. I'm a great-granddaddy.
Well, congratulations on that.
You know, I was a single father for 20-some-odd years with 13 kids. Whoa. You know, I mean, it's all up, a matter of Google. Google it out. So when I offer my services to help young men and women come up, create jobs and stuff like that, I'm looking at land as a development project as well as a memorial.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you can touch that younger generation as you are doing with, you know, getting these DVDs out there, it seems like they're willing to embrace the fact that, you know, history hasn't been told correctly. It seems the more young people that I talk to, the more they realize, maybe even the teachers who are of my generation are telling them, listen, you know, this isn't the whole story. Even though it's not in the book, I'm going to tell you about, you know, what happened over here. And I think as we're seeing more of those young people, and again, we're up against the end of the clock. We could talk with you about this whole other time, but I know that you're involved in a lot of causes with today's youth, and you see the fact that they need something to kind of rally around.
Well, there's no leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a generation, and you can't name me one leader.
Even those who are leading,
you can't call them leaders.
Yeah, because nobody's following.
Know who they are.
Yeah.
What have they done? Since the 60s, 70s, what are these so-called but represent us? Whenever you need a African American to speak, that's who they are.
Yep. No, I know, and like I said, this is something we could talk about on a whole different episode. But we, like I said, we are up against the end of the show, so we'll tell people though that partingways.org is the website where you can find all the information out. I know there's some issues with the contact email on there. When I sent an email to it got bounced back to me. But you guys are on Facebook.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something. The website of partingways.org has a webmaster technicality. We're not experts.
So you're looking for somebody that can donate some time to help you out and be a webmaster.
Well, that's what we're doing now, reaching out now, because I'll tell you, up until 2011, we weren't looking for money. I know that sounds weird, huh? We were looking to get this information out. That was the mission. Now we've accomplished that goal. We know there's enough people out there, mathematically, through deductive reasoning, that this information is going to just keep rolling, perpetual motion. You can't keep secrets. Once you let it out, it's on its own. It takes a life of its own. All right? So now you see it on the History Channel. Now you see it on the Discovery Channel. Now you're hearing about it on the videos, and the rappers are talking about it. Well, this 10 years ago, they weren't.
I hate to cut you off, but we have reached the end point.
Hey, I thank you for calling and giving me a chance to talk about
Thank you, and be sure to send us updates with what's going on.
I certainly will. Remember, if you want good information, go to CapeVerdean.net.
Absolutely. CapeVerdean.net, and then Parting Ways is partingways.org.
.org.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything, and like I said, stay in touch, please.
All right, you have a good night.
You too. All right, we're up against the end of the show, but be sure to join us next week. Stanton Friedman and Kathy Martin will be joining us to talk about their new book, Science Was Wrong. So until then, stay spooktacular.
Talk and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, Citadel Broadcasting, AM 1420, WBSM.
From ABC News, I'm Hillary Barsky. In Egypt, it's still up in the air when the military will be taking the transition to hand over power to an elected government. ABC's Christiane Amanpour reports from Cairo.
From the beginning, they said that the people's grievances were legitimate, and even when they took formal power of the country, they did also say that military power is no substitute for the people's wishes. So they're saying the right thing. The real test is going to be when they lift emergency law, when they have an actual roadmap. You remember Mubarak had said there'd be elections latest September. The military hasn't even said that.
Texas Congressman Ron Paul won the presidential straw poll at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington on Saturday, receiving 30% of the vote. However, that doesn't mean that his win will translate to the GOP's nominee for the White House in 2012. ABC's Taman Bradley.
These things are a small sampling. It depends on who can energize their supporters. Mitt Romney, for example, won CPAC a couple of years ago during the presidential contest.